just got back from spring break.
I did.
How was it?
It was great.
You and two friends went to
The Outer Banks.
the Outer Banks. Man, you're living the life.
I am. I really am.
You are. And God's been blessing.
I'm weak. Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo, Olivia's dad, who watches his daughter go and have a pretty amazing life. You get to go to the Outer Banks for spring break. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget when you asked, you're turning 14, and you're like, Dad, can we go to Scotland for my birthday? Because we were living in Spain at the time. And I was like, no, we're not going to go to Scotland for your birthday. Now, we might be in Scotland on your birthday, but we're not going to Scotland for your birthday. And sure enough, where did we find ourselves?
In Scotland.
For your 14th birthday in Scotland.
Yeah.
So you've lived a pretty incredible life.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Thanks to you.
Well, thanks to the Lord, right?
Yes.
God's been incredibly faithful. Mm-hmm. So this month is we're releasing this episode in April, which is Month of the Military Child, and so we're taking time this month to talk about some of the things that go hand in hand with living a life that is often accompanies those that are in the military. Now, the things we're going to talk about apply to anybody. Who are going through transitions, that are looking to build community. We're going to talk about how do you find a church. So, last episode we talked about the distinct, kind of obstacles people face as military kids. But I had some people message me, and they're like, I think this applies to regular kids as well who are going through changes. And the answer to that question, to that statement is like, yeah, I completely agree.
It's not just subjective. Only military kids face this.
Yeah. I think it's one of those. It's more acute with military kids because that's a type of demographic that is always, always is a big word, but is probably consistently going to face these things. So as you're listening to these podcasts, we hope you'll do a couple things. One is share these podcasts. We're seeing some growth, which is pretty exciting. We won't reveal our numbers just yet, but we're seeing some really great growth, and a lot of that is coming from folks like you who are sharing this podcast with friends and letting others know about it. Every week we get messages and emails from folks saying like, hey, just listen to the latest podcasts. Or in fact, I connected with a friend of mine that your mom and I went to college with. I don't even know the last time I had heard from him. It's probably been north of 20 years.
10.
Yeah. And I was like, bro, I just listened to your podcast. This is really great stuff. So, so if you're listening to this podcast and you think you're benefiting from it, or you think somebody else would benefit from it, we'd love for you to get the word out. If you sign up for our newsletter, I'm saying this on the front end because I don't want to bury it, but on the newsletter, we're going to release it every month. We're going to kind of lay out what we've gone over, but we're also going to give a sneak peek of what's coming up and maybe some other unique opportunities that we have coming up. But today, we're going to talk about how to choose healthy transitions.
Yes.
How do you transition in a way that sets yourself up for success? Now, we've been through quite a few transitions.
You could say.
As a family. We were doing our podcast prep, I was going over this. We've lived on the West Coast. You were born in Indiana. So
I was.
Your brother was born in Ohio. Your mom and I met in Kentucky. Your mom is from Tennessee. So we know that Midwest, Southern lifestyle. I went to college. Your mom and I went to college in Kentucky. We've lived on the East Coast now, North Carolina and Virginia. We've lived in Europe. We spent 4 years in Spain. We've had the chance to travel to a ton of different countries and see a bunch of different stuff. So we've gone through and done quite a few things. You've been, how many schools have you been to? 4? Yeah. Did I add that up right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is it, for a military kid, that's not a lot. It's not a lot. So that's but still handling from schools is can be a difficult thing. I've had 8 different jobs over the handful of years, and some of those it's like, well, you've been a pastor for 25 years. I've been a pastor for 25 years now.
Is that weird?
It's weird to, like, I remember when I was younger, I'd look at people who would say that and be like, man, can you imagine? Now I look at guys who've been doing it for 45 years and go like, wow, can you imagine? So like, I think
These milestones.
Yeah, wherever you're at, it doesn't seem as significant as the next milestone or whatever. But I remember, but you know, so I've been a pastor that long, but I've pastored in a variety of contexts.
Yeah.
I've been a minister in a bunch of different settings that have carried a different, you know, set of responsibilities. You know, I was thinking about the neighborhoods. We've lived in 8 different neighborhoods as a family, which is, and I say neighborhoods, not just homes, because when you buy a home, you're in a neighborhood. So you're getting to know neighbors, you're getting to know the people that live around you, you know, where they come from, how long have they been there. And then we've been to 6 different churches. Most of those I've been a pastor at, but a chunk of them I haven't. So each one of those come with different transitions, right? Usually when there's a job change, there might be a move change, which means there's a, you know, if you're moving to a new community, you might be finding a new church, or you might be finding new neighbors, or whatever it is. But I want to talk about today, how do you transition in a healthy way? Because there was an opportunity when we moved away from Indiana, there was an opportunity to transition in a very unhealthy way. And so the backstory was we had moved to Indiana in the fall of 2004 and moved there to plant a church. And 5 years later, I think it was the last week in September in 2009, we had to close that church down.
Yeah.
And so that was a really heartbreaking time. Didn't expect to have to shut down the church. And there was a bunch of reasons why we had to do it. And I'm not going to go into all of those right now. But at the time I was, you know, I felt like a failed leader. I felt like a failed pastor. I felt like I had done everything I knew to do, but it didn't work out. So then you're wondering,
what did I miss?
what did I miss?
Why? Like, it's not like you've been pastoring forever.
Yeah.
By that point,
Yeah,
it's
at
like
that
your
point-
first church that you opened. It's like, is this?
Yeah, at that point I'd been pastor for about 9 years. And so long enough to start to figure out what my strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
But not long enough to really have, at least for me, to really feel comfortable or confident in that role. Yeah. There's a personality trait that I have, according to the Myers-Briggs personality temperament. It says, I'm at ENTJ, which those that know, and you know, Myers-Briggs know what that means. But I read this paragraph at one time. It said, may exude more confidence than his experience warrants. Which
That's
is
very true.
Yeah, which is kind of I generally have rolled that way, which has gotten me into trouble, you know, sometimes. My point is, like, when we went to shut down that church, there was another church that was kind of helping us through the transition. And so one of the things that they required in order to help us through the transition was they required that I go get professional counseling. Did you know this?
I feel like you've told me, but that was a minute ago.
Yeah, it was probably a while ago. And I didn't want it. I mean, it's not that I didn't want to do it as much as it was like, that's...
Like, I don't want you to tell me.
I don't want to be told to go. And generally speaking, I'd say people that are told to go to counseling usually don't get much out of that counseling. It's like when somebody would come up to me and they're like, hey, can you meet with so-and-so? And I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Here's my phone number. Have them get a hold of me. Well, I can line up a time to have them sit down with you. I'm like, well, yeah, it won't be beneficial.
Yeah,
Unless,
because that person's not reaching out.
Yeah, they're not invested
It's not like you're seeking professional help.
Yeah. So for me, when I was told, like, hey, you're going to sit down with a counselor, that was very much my...
That's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, that was my posture, was like, I don't know if I want to do this. So anyway, I went and sat down with this counselor. And it was somebody we knew. I had no idea who this counselor was, but when they had been a missionary kid with a mission organization my dad used to be on the board of.
Oh.
And so when we sat down, she was like, so tell me about you. And so I kind of glossed over it real quick, right? Because I'm a pastor, so I know how to turn the table on people. And I was like, well, no, tell me about you. And she said, well, I'm a missionary kid. And I was like, where? And she said, Africa. And I said, what organization? And she said the organization. I was like, oh, I know that organization. She's like, oh, you do? And I was like, yeah, my dad's on the board. And she's like, oh, this will be interesting. And it was sort of this, like, the advantage of it was she knew exactly the type of background I had been raised in. She understood theologically where I was coming from. She understood kind of the pastoral passion and burden and expectations that I had been living under. So she was really, really helpful. And during that time, I think I met with her 6 times. It was like I had to go through 6 weeks worth of counseling.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
I mean, more power to you, but...
Yeah. And probably my biggest takeaway during that time that I remember, there may have been a lot more that I haven't thought to give her credit for. But during that time, one of the things she said is, you're getting ready to transition, because we were moving from Indiana out to Oregon.
Yeah.
She said, I'm going to give you an acrostic that we talk about as missionaries, and it's R.A.F.T, R-A.F.T. So the R stands for reconcile, the A stands for affirm, the F stands for farewell, and then fourth, the T stands for think destination. Now, I share that to say, there's this passage in Proverbs 15:22. Do you want to read that for us?
Yeah. It says, get all the advice you can, and you will succeed. Without it, you will fail. That's so direct.
Yeah.
It's not something you have to really think about.
Yeah, and that's from
the
Good News translation, because we looked it up in a couple translations, and I thought that was a little bit more of the kind of clear, cut to the chase, here's what it means. And I like that, get all the advice you can. And I think my temptation is oftentimes the times I need to be getting advice is the times I don't want to be getting advice. That's when I need it the most.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, yeah.
And in that time when I was sitting down with that counselor, I was very much in a place where I did not, I wanted to go run away and hide. I just wanted to disappear. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to grab you and your brother and your mom and throw us into a U-Haul and drive away.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I wanted to do.
Relate to that.
Yeah, I didn't want to face anybody. I didn't want to process anything. I didn't want to go through anything. There were some people that had hurt us during that time. There was not only disappointment that I was living with. I knew there was people who were disappointed in us, or at least I thought they were. In fact, there was one person I told me they were disappointed in me. So it was a time that, you just want to hide. And I think there can be times when people go through transitions where maybe they don't want to be going through those transitions.
Yeah.
The transitions you want to go through are relatively easy.
And you're excited for it?
Yeah.
And you're ready to take it and leave what you're in.
And in the military, we can anticipate transitions because we know how long we're going to be in a particular place, usually.
Sometimes it's really sad.
Yeah.
But then it gets better.
Yeah. So whether it's expected or unexpected, you can do it in an unhealthy way.
That's true.
And so when she laid out this raft, like the ideas you get in this raft to float away, it was like your mom and I have used it ever since.
And I've heard you do sermons on it before and talk about it with us.
Yeah, I've referenced it before because I think it's like almost so simple that it would be really easy to neglect. But one of the things I'm finding is that kind of the most simple things are the most powerful things. Like, don't overthink this stuff. Just do the simple things. So I don't know, as those of you that are listening to the podcast, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you got coming up. I don't know what transitions you may be looking at. Maybe you know someone who's going through a transition or anticipating a transition.
Yeah.
We're getting ready for PCS season, as we call it in the military, or at least in the Navy. I don't know what the Army and Air Force call it, but we're going through a time where folks are going to start moving and transitioning. So this may be some helpful information to pass along. Yeah. So You want to look at the first one here?
Yeah, reconcile. What a powerful word, first of all. The goal of it is to restore friendly relationships between you and another person.
Yeah.
You never want to leave a place unresolved.
Yeah, which...
It's really easy to.
I think it's sometimes you don't want to. That means you got to face some stuff.
Yeah, and it's very uncomfortable, and it requires a lot of presence. It's not something you can just yeah, I'm sorry, or it could, yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and so what, with this, I want to kind of think in two directions. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna
go ahead.
I want to think about the easy one first.
Mm-hmm. The one that we all think of.
Which is I want to start with the restore what was borrowed. That's the one I want to start with because that's kind of the easy one. I don't know, everywhere we've lived, people have borrowed stuff from us or we've borrowed stuff from other folks, neighbors and, oh yeah, I got that. Come on over, you can borrow it. Or they, hey, yeah, I got that thing. Come on over and borrow it. And you go over and you borrow it and you use it for whatever. And then you forget to take it back. Or when you go to take it back, they're not in a place to receive it. And so you don't want to leave it in a driveway or unsecured or, you know what I mean? So it ends up in your garage or on a shelf or whatever the case may be, or in a drawer or in a closet somewhere, or a group of friends come over and somebody left something in your house and you keep talking about getting it back to them. And there's these things that get...
But you remember the things that people have borrowed.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah. And I've kind of, I think we talked about that one time, under generosity, generous muffins, right? We talked about in some ways, if I'm loaning somebody to somebody, I have to be prepared to just lose it for it to come back broken or not to come back at all. But so one way to think about reconcile is what have I borrowed that I need to return? What have what is in my possession that, and again, I was taught if you borrow something, return it
as soon as you're done with it.
As soon as you're done with it, but return it in better condition than you got it.
Oh, yeah.
So clean it up, straighten it up.
I was definitely raised with that moral.
Were you?
As soon as we go to people's houses, before we would get out of a red minivan, you'd be like, hey, you play with their toys, you put it back where you found it. And you put it back right. And you're we don't want to do that. And then some of the friends are like, no, just leave it. I'm like, okay. And you're like, no, you go back up. I'm like, dang, I don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it.
It's good.
It's great.
But when you're 6, you're like...
Yeah, when you're 6, it's this is new information. And particularly if other people don't expect it.
Yeah.
But, your mom and I have hosted a ton. And there were folks there was a couple that they didn't have kids at the time. Kelly and Paul Bedell, they were in our small group and they would come maybe 10 minutes before group and help us set up the house.
Oh yeah.
And then we would make coffee and have snacks and, your mom would make something or somebody would bring something. And then afterwards there would always be dishes or chairs to put away or something to be straightened up. And they would always stick around afterwards and help pick up the house. And it was just a massive blessing because as they were doing that, they freed your mom and I up to go put you kids to bed. My point is their presence improved something. And it's not to say that we thought ill of anybody else. They were in a place that, they didn't have kids. Their vocations kind of created some flexibility for them to be able to stay a little bit later than other folks and help out in that way. So it was a massive step of generosity that they didn't have to do.
Yeah.
But in this context of reconcile, what do you need to restore that has been borrowed? What is that thing that within the next 3 days, 2 days, today, what do you need to return? Clean up, straighten it up, wash it. What could you do that you're returning it in better condition than when you found it? Or if it's broke, go get them a new one, jump on Amazon, have it sent to their house or whatever it is, but restore what was borrowed. And then the second thing is restore what was broken.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
It depends on what the case is, but typically when it's broken, it's harder.
Yeah. Particularly if the relationship has been broken, if trust has been violated.
Because then when you move out of that season and it's not restored,
It lingers.
That it lingers, and then that's all you think about them.
Yeah, or you hope to never run into them again. Or you hope that time fixes it, and the time...
All that time does is that you just get older.
So I think sometimes time... Yeah, you get older. I think sometimes time just makes it... it makes the regret linger. And I think, and I could see somebody saying like, well, what if the other person doesn't want to be restored? Like if you've done the wrong, go apologize. If you've been wronged, I'm not saying you go and say like, hey, you wronged me. But I think you could say like, hey, I want you to know that like, I'm good. I've forgiven, or I'm good, or like, I want to see you again. And I know things went south or things didn't go the way they could have.
Right.
But I'm okay. So I don't want to get too prescriptive with this, because I think this is one of those things that if somebody's in a place where they're looking at a transition, it's coming up, and about those relationships that have been broken, you already know what the Holy Spirit's asking you to do. And our encouragement is that you step into that. Yep. Whatever that is, that you step into that restoration that God has for you, so that admit you've done what you need to do to step forward. Okay, so that's reconcile.
Yeah. Second one is affirm. And to do this, like the goal is to strongly, and if possible publicly, assert the positive impact someone has had on your life.
So there's a passage, Isaiah 41:7 says, the craftsman strengthens the goldsmith, and he who smooths with a hammer, him who strikes the anvil, saying of the soldering, it is good. And they strengthen it with nails so that it cannot be moved. I think the heart of that passage, I think what the Isaiah is getting at is the goldsmith and the craftsman are two people that are working towards the same objective, and they have different skill sets in getting to the same objective. And I think wherever it's possible that you can go and you identify those people that have been helping you get to that same objective, whatever it is, that you take the time to let them know the impact that they've had on you. Yeah. To let them know the impact you've seen them have on others. Like, how can you have some of those last words be words of affirmation before you move on? Because the other thing is this, like with all of these things, and this is all relationally driven stuff, you don't know. None of us know when we're going to run into someone again and be in close proximity to them. So by doing these things, you're sort of investing in a relationship in the future that will be in good standing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm amazed at how small this world is.
Literally.
To where like if you burn bridges in this life, like it's not very appropriate. But I tell people when we talk about the chaplain corps, I've seen people burn bridges, and I'm like, and my comment is like, the pool's too small to pee in, man.
Yeah.
Like if you pee in this pool, you're not only, you can maybe move to a part of the pool where that isn't there anymore, but everybody you just left now has to live with it. And guess what? The pool's not that big. So everybody's going to find out. And then you're not going to be trusted. And so like thinking through those the reality that we all live within these relationships. So how can you affirm those that have made an impact in your future? You're getting ready. You've got a transition coming up.
I do. Head into the big college.
Yeah. So as we're going, I know, we put the notes together, and I shot them to you while you were, sitting on the beach, drinking coffee out on the Outer Banks, while your mom and I were here slaving away, making sure bills got paid and our kids are living their best life.
Only you could see my face.
But when I sent you this, like
parenting's so hard.
Yes, it's a struggle. Did you have anybody in mind? I mean, I don't want you to get specific if it's not appropriate, but like as you were thinking through these things, did because you got a transition coming up, did some stuff come to mind that you need to reconcile or some folks you need to affirm?
I feel like there are definitely areas in my life where I want people to know what I think about them.
Okay.
Not in a bad way. Like, I'm not going to be like, yo, you suck. This is what I really think about you.
I know I've been nice to you for the last 2 years, but here's what I really think.
Give me my erasers back. No.
Give me my razors back?
No, erasers, not razor. Oh my gosh.
I was like, razors. Erasers.
Erasers.
So
you know there's people who like borrowing,
borrowing
borrow
office
your
supplies.
pencils and they're like, I'll get you back. Or
And they don't.
gum. Oh my goodness.
Why would you borrow gum?
You know people who borrow gum?
No,
in
I
school?
don't. I'm like, you can have it. I don't need that back.
Well, it's not that, but like.
I got you next time type thing. Okay.
Anyway.
So have you have some folks in mind as you're going through this?
Yeah. And it's definitely like, there's people in your life that you don't know why you're not talking to anymore.
Okay.
And part of me, like, I kind of want to know why. Like, I know I didn't think I did anything wrong.
Yeah.
But, like, we were friends, and now it's kind of, like, distant. Like, what
And
did I do?
sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's nothing that's happened. It's just.
But I'm like, I don't want to leave this chapter and then them just live with that one story.
Oh, they think something. In the absence of truth, well, in the absence of truth, a lie will always reside.
What a poet.
You like that?
I do.
Yeah.
That's going to be in the newsletter. If you subscribe now, little intermission. I mean, there's definitely like parts where I'm like, we used to sit at lunch together and I'll say hi. She doesn't say anything. I'm like, I wonder why. Like, I didn't do anything. Like, not that I know of, but I'm curious.
Yeah. So affirm.
Affirm. Yeah. Next. Farewell. Yeah. We want to say goodbye to the people. We know people who just get up and go. We don't know have left.
Yeah. And I think, so this is twofold. So one is saying goodbye, and the other one is letting others say goodbye. And this is one of the things that I've, as transitions are coming up, I consistently talk to folks about is like, hey, what are you doing to, are you going to this? Like I did a retirement ceremony.
Yeah.
Recently. And when several months ago, the person who came up to me, they were organizing it for this friend, and they said, "Yeah, so and so's going to be retiring." It's like, "Oh, when's the ceremony?" And they said, "Well, they're not sure they want one." I was like, "They need to have one." And they're like, "Well, why?" And I said, "Because like you need these markers in life." And this is a marker in life, a chance for them to say goodbye to this life, and then a chance for others to say goodbye to them in this capacity in their lives. And that is an incredibly healthy thing. He's like, really? And I was like, so, like historically, I don't know if you remember this, but when we went to Rome, or Paris, when we went to Paris, as the Curtises are wont to do.
He's forgetting his travel experiences. Where was I again?
Where was I again? Oh,
Paris.
Paris.
My gosh.
So when we were in Paris, the Arc de Triomphe is up there in Paris, kind of big famous location, and Napoleon had it built. And one of the things I began to notice was like all these European cities have these arches. Why? Like, why an arch? Where did this come from? And it turns out that if what I read was true, it turns out that what they would do, because it's always right outside the city, or with the city at the time it was built, right? Cities outgrow. But at the time it was built, these arches would be put just outside the city. And on the inside this city would be, well, let me put it, so when armies would come home from war, inside the city would be all the families and the like the parade route for, particularly if they were victorious, obviously, right? For all of the family members and citizens and all of those folks to be gathered to receive back their own, right? On the other, so you have these soldiers coming in, and then what would happen is a priest would come to them before they would enter the city, and they would say, so what happened on this battlefield? There were things that you did that you shouldn't have done. There were lives that were taken that you had to take to protect our city. There was sin that you committed. And know that as you walk through this arch, your sins are forgiven. And you can be ready to be received by those that love you on the other side. Which is, so it served as this marker for them to say farewell to what had been, so they could say hello to what was welcoming them. And I think that's like, we need those markers in our life for folks to be able to kind of like let people say goodbye. Like we mentioned in the last podcast, people wrote on that chapel photo that we have.
The part I got emotional. I didn't mean to, guys. It just happened.
It's good.
Thanks, Dad. My crying's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then and I have one from the last, when I was on the Porter and officers signed that and wrote notes. And I even got I got a Blue Jacket manual, which is like the manual for sailors. I think it was 1942 edition that the Chiefs Mess wrote, and they all wrote notes to me inside the flap of it, which was really cool. The idea is like, it's kind of embarrassing to let people do that, like say goodbye. But
because it's not like it's a sad thing. Because goodbye is not like a thing you necessarily look forward to.
Yeah.
You kind of just want to ignore it.
Yeah.
And be like, I don't want to be said goodbye to because I want to be on good terms and I know I'll see you again. And goodbye is just really sad. So I'm just going to leave.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that reaction is a reaction to pain. It's not a choice to be healthy. Yeah. And I really want to make sure, we're calling this episode Choosing Healthy Transitions.
Yeah.
We're not saying choosing pain-free transitions. Mike Tatlock, pastor at Grace Chapel, he had this line one time in a sermon I thought was great. He said, the absence of pain is not the presence of health. So just because you aren't experiencing any pain doesn't mean you're healthy, right? So we're talking about healthy transitions, not fun transitions, not painless or pain-free transitions. How can you do this in a healthy way? And giving people the opportunity to be able to say their farewells, for them to be able to affirm, which again, I'm not saying this is not about like an ego-driven thing. Yeah. This is not a, hey, put me in the limelight so I can hear what people think of me and how awesome I am and all that. That's not the point. The point is for the community to remind themselves what they are about, how one of their own accomplished those things, and now that person is being sent with blessings to move forward. Yeah.
I'll say this because this applies real quick. When we lived in Spain, there was this ministry group called Cadence. Sorry, I'm not murmuring. And when there was the season of transition, they would have these Kevin and Sharon, what do you call them? Like our youth pastors. Yeah. Okay, let me explain what Cadence is. Cadence is a ministry that goes where navals or just bases in general
military bases are.
And they provide like a youth group for the youth.
They provide a variety of things. Yeah. Usually it started off as like hospitality houses. So it was like, it could be a home away from home. But it was a Christ-centered place for people to have enjoy some home-cooked meals, for them to be able to interact with people who love Jesus, to have Bible studies, because not every base has an active chapel or chaplains that, are Christian necessarily, right? So it created a kind of that constant ministry space for folks to be served. Yeah.
So one of the things that they made it, I don't know if it was just them or if that's something Cadence wants people to do, but Kevin and Sharon, and then we had a other youth leader, Bradley McDaniel. Is that his last name? Yeah, I haven't said that in a minute. Anyway.
It's usually just Bradley.
It's just Bradley. Yeldar. Sorry. He'll listen to this and be like, she remembers. Anyway, they made it mandatory. Like, not mandatory, but like important that we say goodbye to the people that are moving.
Oh, good.
So what I mean by that. So they would, during this season of transition, they'd say, who's moving within this set of period of time? And then we will recognize you. So there was this chair that they wouldn't do youth group for that, like that evening.
Yeah.
And they would do one by one. You just say what you like about them or like what you appreciate them. And so then that makes you really excited.
For your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes you prepared. And I remember I don't remember all the examples, but they would do different, before they would have this this Thursday night, they did a study of like how different people say goodbye and then what's good and what's not good.
Yeah.
Because what is that implication leaving on other people? And so I remember like the turtle, like you don't want to mention it. You don't want to mention that you're leaving. You're not giving a date. You're just kind of hiding in your shell. You don't want to say goodbye because then that's going to involve emotions you don't want tampered with. Or then there's the ones who's super excited. Like, I'm excited to move because that's my next transition. That's where God wants me. There are these like different.
A porcupine who's like really
like
spiky. Like you talk to him like, you leaving soon? Yeah, I'm leaving soon. Why? I'm like, oh, okay. Are you excited? What about moving? About packing up all my stuff?
And it's just so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that emotional reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a super good thing that we did, was that our community are like friends for maybe a year, 2 years, 6 months, that we get to recognize the people who have ultimately shaped our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you're listening to this and you might be going like, hey, I'm not moving, so I don't have a transition coming up. So what's the big deal? But do you know somebody who has a transition coming up? And what can you do to rally folks around them, to bless them as they go, to do a really healthy farewell? And again, it's a farewell. It's not like we will never see you again.
Bye.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. This is a like, hey, until we see you again.
Yeah.
Like here's what you've meant. Here's what you mean to us. And it's not a, like, I think sometimes people think, yeah, but they hurt me in this way, or they weren't kind in that way. And it's like, okay,
fix it.
Well, and you know what? I'm sure you weren't exactly awesome. Right? So like, let's put down the judgment pistol that we like to shoot people's way and go like, all right, but what did they do that was good? What did they do that was a blessing? What did they do that was an encouragement? And again, like I'm a massive believer. Like if you're like, oh, I can't think of anything. Oh, pray about it and see what God gives you. He'll give you something. He'll give you something. He's really good at ideas. Okay. So reconcile, affirm, farewell, and then
think destination. Nice.
And
the goal.
Yeah,
I'll read the goal.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Goal, space. Cultivate a clear vision of where you are going and the opportunities that may exist. That, I feel like, is a step people don't think about. It depends on the circumstance. Some people are like, I'm moving to Hawaii. I'm going to live my best life. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
You get that's an exciting opportunity. Or sometimes people are like, I've heard really bad things about this. This is just not going to be exciting. That's what Virginia was. For those who are listening, I love Virginia, by the way. Way better than all the experiences I've heard other people. I had friends that were like, I'll never move to Virginia. It's so busy. Everyone goes there. You'll run into people you've seen and you don't want to see them. I know who lives there. I know, and it cultivates this unhealthy behavior, because what you focus on and what your perspective is how you're going to face reality.
Yeah. And it's all based on hearsay.
Oh yeah.
It's not based upon your experience or
it's not like, wow, Virginia sucks. Have you ever been? No.
Yeah. Well, that's in some ways like when I found out we were moving from Spain to Virginia, because there was for a little bit, it was up in the air as to whether or not we would move to Norfolk, which for those that don't know is the largest naval base in the world. So it's like Navy out here. Or Mayport, Florida.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, give me Mayport. Like I heard great things about Mayport. And generally speaking, I enjoy being away from high density areas. And so when I found out we were going to Norfolk, there's part of me was like, meh.
I don't want to go.
don't
I've heard
know
really
if I
bad
like-
things.
Yeah,
It's
I've been
not-
there. Traffic's horrible, but like since we've moved here, it's like actually this is
We're chilling.
We bought a house here,
Yeah.
you know. So, I think it's like okay. So this think destination thing.
Mm-hmm.
Think accurately about where you're going. And I think there can be one of two ditches. So one ditch that we're talking about is where you're thinking poorly about something not based upon your experiences, but you're thinking poorly about something based upon what other people have said. Now,
Judgment pistol went off, dude.
judgment pistol went off. Now, maybe you've had some poor experiences, but here's the thing. And this is, like places change, neighborhoods change, people change. So like what you left might not be what you're coming back to. So that's the one piece, right?
Yeah.
Thinking negatively about it. So get an accurate picture of what that destination is. Because, if the one ditch is thinking negatively, the opposite ditch is thinking of it in a fantasy sort of way, that you've built up in your mind something that is completely unrealistic. It's like I was talking to somebody who had a very, very poor experience in Spain. Like they did not enjoy their time in Spain. Now the base we went to, most people are like, "Oh man, that's like it's the
jackpot.
It's the number one requested duty station or number two requested duty station in the Navy." And so this person had built up like, by 2 p.m., I'm going to be on the beach, sipping on sangria. It's going to be the chill life. It's going to be, just like they had in their mind this vacation for 3 years they were basically going to be taking. And then they got there and there was actually quite a bit of work to get done. And there was quite a bit of responsibility they had to step into. And there was, you could go down the line. Now, they were still going to the beach on the weekends with their family. They still had the opportunity to travel throughout Europe for not much money. Like all of these things were still true, but they were so hung up on it not matching the fantasy they created in their mind, they set themselves up for failure.
But isn't that just so true? Like, period.
Sure. Yeah. But I think sometimes we do that, particularly when we're going through transitions. I think we do that if to mitigate against pain.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I want my next thing to be, I have to kind of imagine it being so incredibly amazing. It will help the pain of dealing with what I have in front of me right now. And what I would argue is like, that's not a healthy coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So think destination. So, recognize you're going to be in a season where there's more goodbyes than hellos. There's going to be, you're stepping into a season where you've got to build trust all over again because there's all these new relationships, people that don't know you, they don't know they can trust you. So you have to relationally learn how to create that equity. In fact, we're going to talk about how do you build community here in a couple podcasts.
And you definitely have to take that step, like out of the comfort zone. Because you have to recognize you're not going to necessarily you might have better relationships than you had somewhere else. You could also have poorer relationships than you had somewhere else.
And it's not about comparison.
No.
It's about it. This is what it is.
Yeah. And then what are you going to do in the moment? Because God can change your world in an instant. And if you're not taking that step of like, this is where God has me. This is a blessing. I'm still breathing. I have food downstairs. Like, I have a house, I have a shelter. Like there are all these things that you can take for granted and you're like, I don't like this. Like it's just not my thing and I'm not going to have the same relationships. And you just feed that lie.
Yeah.
And
you've thrown a pity party.
Yeah.
For one, because nobody wants to hang out with you.
Literally. And it's like, and also relationships aren't the same.
And that's okay.
And that's fine. And it's just something that you recognize and you move on. Like you don't need to hang up in the past and be like, back then, that's where I was.
That's when I had real friends.
That's when, yeah. Or when I visit, we're gonna bring everyone together and it's going to be just like where we left off. That could be the case.
No, it will never be the case. To be honest with you, that's not a truth because everybody's changed and that place has changed. Now, I'm not saying don't bring people together.
Right.
I'm saying bring people together, but recognize things have changed. Now, that can be a great thing. It's like, several years ago, my best friend Vara from college.
Yeah.
This was back in 2010. I think it was summer of 2010. So it's been a hot minute. But so he was the best man in my wedding. I was the best man in his wedding. We flew to Thailand to be.
Yeah.
He is Thai, so he's from Thailand. And when I found out I was going to be in California because he was taking a bunch of students from his church to visit a mission. Yeah, visit a mission in California. And so I found out he was coming. I'm like, bro, when are you going to be there? And so we were messaging back and forth. And I said, if I flew down just for one night, could we hang out? And he's like, yes. So I got on like a Southwest Airlines flight after work one day. I think it was like a Friday or something like that. Flew down, got there late afternoon, early evening. And then we like hung out till 3 a.m. I got 2 or 3 hours of sleep and he took me to the airport and I flew home. So like we hung out for 7-8 hours, whatever it was. I like packed a backpack. That was it. I didn't even, I didn't need anything other than that. And the objective was to see him. Now at that point, this was a guy I hadn't seen in, maybe 7 years.
Yeah.
And when we were hanging out, it was like we hadn't skipped a beat. It was awesome. But he's married. He's got kids now since I had last seen him. You had been born since he had last seen. So we had changed significantly. So we weren't hung up on trying to recreate the past. We were focused on stepping into the present moment.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In what was going on in each other's lives.
Yeah.
And like he has permission to ask me about anything in my life. And I know I can share with him, the worst parts of me. And I know I'm going to be loved and vice versa. So we can share those things with one another in a way that's super exciting and dynamic.
Yeah. But you're both recognizing this is not college.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and actually now I have a new thought with all this. Cause like when we think about destination, like if this T is think destination, some of the destination is, hey, these people I'll be able to see again sometime, maybe at some point. So I'm going to set things up so that when that moment happens, we're not trying to recreate something. We're stepping into something new that's fresh, but the relationships are in a good place. Trust has been maintained that we can step into that moment with one another.
Reconciliation has taken place.
Yeah. Yeah.
You left on a good note.
Okay. So R.A.F.T. Reconcile, affirm, farewell, think, destination. Yeah. And again, we recognize that like transitions are hard. And it's okay. It's okay for them to be hard. And it doesn't mean you're not excited about, there may be some folks like, I know when I was going to college, I was done with high school. I was like, I am ready to get out of here. Not that I didn't like it. Not that I didn't like my friends. I was just ready. So it wasn't something that was difficult. But I also don't know if I wish I would have known this back then. Because there were some people I would have pulled aside that I would be like, hey, I want you to know this is the kind of friend you've been to me. And I want to thank you for that. Here's, stepping into some opportunities for those farewells that maybe I cut short. I was like, I don't want to go to that. Right? Because I don't want to be awkward. I don't want to end up, I might feel emotional and cry. And I don't want to cry in front of everyone. You know what I mean? Like all those things that we let kind of creep in. That rob us of stepping into these healthy transitions.
I get that.
All right.
Cool.
You got any last words?
No.
Okay.
Particularly.
All right.
Yeah, that's really healthy. I'm glad you went to that counselor.
This is good, right?
You got this. If you hadn't gone, we wouldn't probably talk about this.
In looking back, because this has, because I got that information from her all those years ago, this has probably set us up for a tremendous amount of success.
Yeah.
That I haven't really taken the chance. I probably can't even assess what that is. So again, our encouragement is walk through this. We have show notes available for you. We've instead of putting the text in the show notes, we're actually creating a link to a PDF, so you can download all these show notes, print them off if they want to forward that off to somebody else and say, hey, check out this podcast, or here's the notes, or here's what they talked about. Our aim is to equip you, right? We want to provide like biblically oriented, sound advice in a way that's relevant to where we live. It's applicable to the lives that, to a situation we may find ourselves in. So if you're finding these podcasts helpful, we talked about it at the top of the hour, please share this with somebody, maybe 2 or 3 folks. Say, hey, I know you got a PCS coming up, or you got a transition coming up, or you're graduating from this, or you're going through this change, or whatever it is. Here's some maybe helpful information that could benefit you. You can also rate, review, follow us on this podcast. By doing that, you help us get the traction that we need to be able to, keep bumping up in the numbers. Every week I check our where we're at in the rankings.
And then he shows me, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm shook.
It's going up every week.
It is.
Which is pretty rad. So
thank you.
Thank you guys for listening and helping us get the word out about this. If you want to connect with us directly, you can do that by emailing us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com. We're always looking for ways to deepen the quality and expand the impact of this podcast. So if you have some ideas on how we can do that, we welcome your input. So there we go. Hope you guys transition well.